Welcome. Today's presentation is on localism, the importance of place and local businesses in our economy. I'm Ed Gulick, candidate for City Council and your host for today's presentation. So our place is people want to connect to place, right? This is something that's people like feeling that they are a part of the place they're living in. And the place is more than just the landscape, though. I mean, we are very blessed here in Billings to have incredible places here. But connecting is more than just our landscape. And to illustrate that, let's just do a quick thought exercise. Let's think about a town or city that you've really enjoyed visiting. It could be recently or not that recently, but think about a place you visited and then think about what did you enjoy doing there. So I'm going to give you about 15 seconds or so, and then you can chat, use the chat function to let us know what that place was and what were the activities you enjoyed doing there. Okay, so starting to have things come in. Sydney reported loving eating good food and walking the streets of San Francisco. Shelley talked about watching the boat traffic on the Columbia River. Oh, Becky did that. Going to Hood River in Oregon and going to enjoy the amazing downtown. Kathy was talking about visiting museums in DC. So yeah, all these things or Flathead region in Montana for hiking. These are all things that, these memories most likely did not involve a national chain store. They were kind of unique to those places, and they probably didn't occur on streets like this. Because local businesses are also part of places. And so here in Billings, we have a great abundance of very great local businesses. And we've added many over the last couple of decades, and we've also unfortunately lost some too. But they are a part of what makes this place Billings. And I'm an architect, so of course I have to mention that local buildings are also a part of place. And this one, of course, the Western Heritage Center is also a museum. And so it helps you understand your place better and connects you, roots you in the place. And I think there's been an interesting study that was called The Soul of the Community that was done by the Knight Foundation, where they surveyed 24,000 residents in 26 different communities. And what they found was that the communities that were doing the best, had the most economic prosperity, the people who lived there were very attached to that place. That was the #1 indicator that a place was doing really well economically. And they also found that people who are connected to their place were more likely to be civically involved, to vote, to invest in their community, and to pay taxes. And so, and this is kind of a virtuous cycle, because the more people are doing that in their community, the more it creates a richer, more incredible place as well, and the more desirable it is. So there are reasons, though, besides placemaking that we want to support, that we want successful local businesses. So this is get into a little bit about how local economies work. So let's talk about coffee houses. So we're all familiar with Starbucks, a national chain that has a well-established brand and is really by the standards of national chains quite good to their employees. They have pretty decent wages and lots of good benefits. And we're going to compare that to some local coffee houses as well, and talk about why there are benefits to the local coffee houses above and beyond what we might experience with Starbucks. Benefits to our local economy, to our sense of place. And this illustration, this is my I've adopted and adapted an illustration that Kimber Lanning from Local First Arizona had done. She's been very helpful in letting me understand things. So let's take a look at, let's compare these Starbucks to, say, local coffee houses. So do they have local sales staff? Well, yes, Starbucks has that, and certainly so do the local coffee houses. Do they pay their property taxes? Yes, Starbucks does that just as much as the other local coffee houses. Do they use local suppliers? Well, in the case of Starbucks coffee, that'd be a no. In the case of local suppliers with the local coffee houses, maybe. That's a qualified. Of course, the product they sell, coffee, is not raised locally. And they may get a lot of their stuff locally from local suppliers, or they may get it from Amazon, procurement. So that's a maybe. It's qualified. Do they use a local banker? Well, Starbucks certainly wouldn't. A local coffee house, most likely, but not for sure. Where do they get their payroll services from? Well, Starbucks is definitely not local in that case. Whereas the local business would be. Do they have a local accountant or lawyer? Definitely not in the case of Starbucks, probably in the case of our local suppliers. What about graphic design or website design? Definitely not in the case of Starbucks, but local. And so all of these suppliers, bankers, payroll services, attorneys, accountants, web designers, these are all the secondary jobs that are provided, that are supported by the local business. And all of those people with secondary jobs in turn are supported in terms of they have offices, they have that need to be maintained. And so that there are tertiary jobs that support those secondary jobs. So this is where the multiplier effect comes with local businesses. I'd heard for a long time that, you should shop local, it's good for your local economy. That kind of intuitively made sense, but I didn't, until I understood about the secondary and tertiary jobs, I didn't really understand how that mechanism worked, or that multiplier effect, but it is really key. So now let's think about comparing them in terms of what they contribute in terms of local entrepreneurial vigor. Starbucks is all of that energy is in Seattle. It's not here, but definitely the local coffee houses provide that. Do they bring creative energy to the community? I think that's not only in terms of entrepreneurial vigor, but it's also in terms of do they have like local musicians or local artists, things on the wall, whatnot? Yes, in the case of those local businesses. And does the business add to our community's sense of place? Well, Starbucks you find in almost a community of almost any size these days, and so it doesn't really doesn't create attachment to a place, but definitely these local coffee houses do. And So looking again, this is a study kind of graphically shown looking at local office supply stores. And on the left, we see the people that the business hires in terms of their warehouse staff, delivery staff, and sales staff from the locally owned office supply store versus the national chain. And so we have all of these secondary and tertiary jobs that are created with a locally owned supply store. This is another way of graphically looking at it. So if you spend $100 at a local business, 68 of those dollars stay in your local economy if you shop tip the local place, versus if you spend $100 at the non-local business, only $43 stays. And updating this kind of crude diagram I did just an hour ago, looking at if we're updating this now for the internet era, if we consider, for instance, a local hospital or government agency or educational institution that spends, say, $5 million in office supplies over, I don't know, 5-year period, if they spend that through Amazon business, only $250,000 of that's going to stay in the local economy. With the national chain like Office Max, $650,000 would stay in the local economy, whereas the local business, 1.6 million. So even though like it's not even about the paper being made locally. It's just, it's where are those jobs associated? And the online jobs are not local. And just maybe one follow-up there is just that, you know, if the local institutions, the hospital or the local government agency is interested in supporting their, to having a thriving local economy that pays for that's part of the tax base, it really makes sense for them to have policies in place that would recognize that and account for that in their procurement policies. So let's consider how local economies work, a model. Let's think of maybe a bathtub. Consider that. So in this bathtub, we have inflows of water from exports of our resources and of goods and services. So that's bringing money into the local economy. And we also have money leaving the local economy. And so that a big part of that is the $3 for a cup of coffee or $5 or whatever the hell it is now these days. A lot of that's going out. All the secondary and tertiary jobs that are being supported in Seattle, that's leaving our local economy. That's going to Seattle, for instance. If we look at leaks to utilities for inefficient, wasteful buildings and equipment, that's another thing that we can potentially recoup if we do that. But I've talked to business owners where 10–11% of their annual income goes to utilities. That's a real drag on that local business that could be better spent on their staff, on maybe being more profitable. Leaks to fund inefficient sprawl infrastructure. So a lot of the money we spend doesn't really have on infrastructure. Some of it doesn't have a very good return on investment. So the total amount of water in that bathtub is sort of our community wealth. And so the idea of the sort of conventional economic development is trying to have the flowing water exceed the amount of that's leaking out or flowing out. And some communities have some success at doing that, but a lot of them, the water flows out as fast as it comes in. You just don't have either economic or sort of social wealth that's accumulating and building on it. So let's consider another model where we've actually taken measures to reduce those leaks. We plug it with a comprehensive local business program or or at least some sort of, we're cultivating a culture of localism, right? That what we're talking about here today is well understood by a lot of influential people, that we have policies in place for procurement policies in our major institutions, that the local businesses are buying from other local businesses. We're creating a culture of that. If you have a lot of that, there's going to be very little, much less water leaking out of the local economy. We can plug leaks from our local economy with energy efficiency programs for our buildings, such as the commercial property assessed capital enhancements, which is a bill that's actually right now in the state legislature. We can also be more strategic about how we fund our infrastructure. And so we want infrastructure that actually has a good return on investment. And so when you do this approach, you can, by reducing the amount of leaks, your local economy is more resilient. You're not as dependent on having large inflows of capital all the time. So your community wealth, the level of water in the bathtub can be rising even without times of a lot of water flowing in. So this is kind of homegrown prosperity economic development model. It's kind of like economic gardening. You're cultivating the economy, and rather than focusing on increasing the amount of water coming in, or increasing more exports of services and goods and services, you're focusing on minimizing imports, because you have more of the stuff happening locally. So, false prosperity versus a real prosperity. Consolidated distant ownership versus local diverse ownership. Impersonal, hidden, and complex versus personal, transparent, and direct. When you have locally owned businesses, you know who the people are to talk to if you have a problem, or if you want to, you have more direct access to where decisions are made, more responsive. Money leaving the local economy benefiting few versus money staying in the local economy benefiting a lot of people. And kind of more homogenized loss of heritage with national chains or online versus a unique culture and a pride of place with local economic development. So do we want to live in a community with a strong sense of place? Do we want to live in a community where money doesn't leave the local economy as fast as it enters? If we answer yes to those questions, we need to be supporting our local businesses and, having fun doing so. I mean, it really does enrich your life to be having these, it gives meaning to it when you are working with local entrepreneurs. And so, I'm running for city council. What could city council do with regard to this issue? I mean, I think part of it is just the bully pulpit. I mean, we can champion local business by spreading an understanding of how the local multiplier effect works, for instance. But we could perhaps also review and maybe sponsor state legislation regarding procurement that would incentivize incentives for local suppliers of goods and services, or maybe it's just working with city policy on that, and maybe that's a model for other institutions as well. I think there are some things that city council could do. And what can you do? Well, certainly buy local and take small steps to shift spending habits from online and national chains where it makes sense. I mean, obviously, there are some things that just aren't available at local stores. Electronics and things like that tend to be more national chains from international businesses and whatnot. But maybe make a point of shifting, say, 10 to 25% of things that you buy and find out where they can be done locally. That makes a big difference. Spread the word. You could share this presentation, which we'll be posting on the edforbillings.com website soon. And that's a way of yeah, reaching more people, and the more people we can reach, the more this local economic understanding builds. And you can support candidates who prioritize a connection to place and localism. So let's stand up for Billings, and let's build our local economy by connecting to place and to local businesses. So thank you all.